to another edition of Steel and Whiskey. I'm Doug Evans.
I'm Michelle McCarthy.
Today we just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about learning SDS2, and some of that comes into learning just what steel detailing is.
Right.
So when you learned, kind of walk me through it. You knew nothing about steel.
Right. I came out of college. I had an advertising degree. I didn't know a thing about steel, so I got a lesson on, this is a wide flange, this is a channel, this is angle iron. There's no such thing as a beam stretcher or a sky hook. Don't let anyone convince you there is. Like, I got a 1 week crash course on steel, and then they stuck me in a training class with regular customers.
Correct.
And this was right when...
And they may be me.
Maybe. It was right when 7.0 came out.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a changeover from 6.3 to 7.0. So there's a lot of people that maybe even knew steel, but it was such a drastic change at that time. They were switching over to 7.0 and learning the new modeling kind of mechanisms there.
Right.
But, so I sat in that class, and I'll tell you, I had a dream. Because I'm powering through this, I have no idea. I had a dream that I was building a roller coaster in SDS2, and I couldn't get the connections to work. And then I was dropped down in front of it, and it was working, and I had to go ride it. I'm like, no, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's
but
probably
it
all
was
too
an immersive course, right? And within 4 months, I was able to demo and kind of talk the talk and understand what I was talking about. So like SDS2 is a product you can learn. I think it's a product that helps you learn detailing. It helps you learn steel too because of the imagery that you get there and the visualization behind it.
And what is steel detailing? So I broke it down into, creating, so you just have a beam that you need to connect. So it's creating the connection material,
Right.
and then presenting a drawing for fabrication so that somebody can build it in a shop. And that evolved and changed over time. So what is steel detailing? Depending on a shop capacity and their equipment is different. But it's still fundamentally creating connection material that goes on the end of members and then presenting it for fabrication with a list of material.
Right. I explained it to my friends that maybe didn't know, aren't in construction, don't know what it is. I explained it as, we're the guys that make the IKEA bookshelf drawing. And so piece A goes next to piece B and they're connected by piece C. Like, that's a way everyone, I think, really can understand what you're doing by detailing. Is you're creating those drawings of how things go together and what pieces connect to each other, what the relationships are behind everything. Now, learning the deeper parts of steel detailing is far more advanced than an IKEA bookshelf, I'll tell you that. But that's an easy way for me to kind of get people who didn't know about it to understand what I was doing.
And then when you get into specifically SDS2, and so SDS2's, everybody that knows this knows our one of our strongest, if not the strongest point, is our automated connection design.
Right.
And so the creation of that material, the welds, the bolts, the holds, is more automated. But I think, and I'd be curious of your opinion, I think that automation also helps you learn the craft of detailing.
Yes. Yeah. Understanding, when I looked at it, I'm like, well, they're all 3 inches. The bolts are 3 inches apart.
Right.
Why aren't they 4?
Right.
Like learning those sorts of things. Well, you only need 1.5 inches on each side of the bolt to prevent tear through. Or maybe I'm totally wrong.
No, you're
like, I think that's what I learned. Those types of things, like it was just doing it because it did it, and I was kind of learning detailing through looking at some of the help menu to see why things were a certain way, or why the gauge is 6 inches or 4 inches, or why narrow gauge, and why that happens.
And another interesting thing, and it's not, I guess it is unique to SDS2, because we try to automate the process, that we have this thing called setup.
Right.
And so what is setup? Setup is all these variables that are shop preferences. They might be field clearance information, they might be capacity links, but there's more than one fabricator has taken that, they purchased SDS2 for the first time, they've printed it out and filled it out, and it's taught them about their business.
Right. And I'll tell you, I think a good setup and a bad setup is thousands of dollars of difference of steel going through your shop. Having that setup dialed into the way you want to fabricate and being able to get those things really, really tight on whether you're just trying to optimize maybe the plate thicknesses on gussets.
Yeah.
Getting those types of things so that you only have to order all 1/2 inch gusset plates instead of 3/4 and 3/8 and 1/2 inch, and having all these other materials around. you can really, really dial in your shop, which is so cool that a product can do that and help you optimize things.
Yeah, and so when they go through the original setup, they start to uncover what I'm good at. Am I good at drilling? Am I good at coping?
Right.
Am I good at welding? All these different things. Right. What am I most efficient, and where is my best advantage over my competitors as a fabricator, not as a software.
Or if you're a big shop, where is this piece getting fabricated? Kind of like I was mentioning with PBS. They've got a robotic welder. If it's going to go through bay 1, it's going to go through that, and everything should be welded. If it's going to go through bay 2, we're going to do everything bolted. So depending on what's the most busy or what's the least busy, being able to flip back and forth with your setup can help you optimize and save tons and tons of money in labor and materials.
And so that gets to the fundamental, just like I was saying. Yeah. So learning SDS2, we can teach junior high kids to model. I mean, they're really good at it. They like the graphics.
Yeah.
But understanding, really the learning of SDS2 then is on how it can impact my business is the setup and understanding why I set 3 inches for holes or what a gauge is or using slots and all those little check boxes and setup. That's a lot of where the learning is.
Right. And I'll say this as well. I think the setup in SDS2 helped me learn more than anything. With the videos that are embedded in it, the imagery, so I can see a picture of exactly what that checkbox is doing, helps me understand the difference between things. So I learned a ton just by clicking help.
And more than, again, many fabricators, when they get SDS2 for the first time, will have a meeting with their shop people and saying, let's discuss our shop preferences. Right. Why do we draw things this way? Why do I have a running dimension? Why do I tail dimensions? Do I want to run to each hole? And so all these different requirements that shops have had for decades, they actually discuss and say, well, now with a layout machine, now with a drill line, now with a Python, depending on the machines that they purchased, didn't update their standards, but they purchased these machines, so some of the requirements just aren't needed.
Right. Or it helps you grow if you think about that. If you're a little guy starting out with a mag drill, you adjust the setup to be more efficient for that fabrication method. Yeah. You get a beam line, all right, click these 3 buttons, now by clicking 3 buttons, we're efficient for a beam line.
Right.
Which is really cool. And so it's really important, I think, to learn the setup part of SDS2 because of that. Like, there's a lot of value in being proficient in what information's in there. And this is the secret, I'm going to tell you. Coming in 2021, you'll be able to search the setup.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah. I probably should be quiet about it, but I think it's cool. I think it's okay to say.
And so because we automate the process, and most softwares don't automate it, they just regurgitate. They just show you a 3D picture of the information you give it. But since we automate it, we have to have this setup thing, which is just kind of unique to our product.
Right.
But it really does help you learn what your fabrication is doing and why you pick this versus that.
Right. And
so over the 30 years I've been there, the product thinks the same, but the setup has grown so much that it has, A, B, C, and then based off A, B, C, I can do A, B, C.
Right.
And so the flexibility of adapting to your shop has changed dramatically. It's like I've always said, we don't want to come in and change how you do things. We want to automate how you do things.
The other thing I think I learned too when I was learning SDS2 is that the logic of SDS2 when you're in the model is the same logic of someone that's in the shop. So you think about putting on maybe an edge angle, welding that onto a beam, right? Depending on how you're going to fabricate it, determines how you're going to add it. So like learning that, thinking about how a guy in the shop would build this thing, okay, then I'll add a material to the beam instead of adding a separate piece that would get its own detail if it's field assembled. So those types of, I guess, fabrication isms that are built in, we talk about detailing isms, there's fabrication isms too, right?
Sure. And even like bending plate or cutting plate out of using a plate burner, if in the fabrication process they're going to buy a long maybe piece of bar and then roll it versus just cutting the roll, how are you going to fabricate it?
Right.
Then model it the same way. Model it straight and then bend it, or actually cut it out of plate. So depending on how you fabricate, that's a good point. That's the way you should input it into the model.
Right. Which I think makes a lot of sense for a fabricating product.
Yeah.
to work like the fabricator would work instead of teaching a fabricator to work like programmers.
Right.
Right? So I think that's a unique value that just having maybe some of the employees that we've had here that have the knowledge from a fabricator standpoint, like James and others, has helped SDS2 over the years. So let's talk about the next generation of detailers and how they're going to push for advancements in steel detailing as an industry. I mean, I think automation is going to be key.
Absolutely. And so the concept of creating connection materials like we talked about based off rules and codes won't change. And we talked about how each fabricator has unique strengths. They have rules and codes within the fabricator on how they do things. And so I think when you look at next gen, I think that automation is something that those guys in that industry, that group of people, is continue wanting more and more automation. Well, as software developers, that means we got to provide flexibility, right?
Right. I mean, you can't automate things for thousands of different people all the same way always. Right. Everyone has different needs, from the way their shops are set up to what maybe their project requirements are. So you can't just automate it and say, hey, it's done this way only. You've got to have preferences, and you've got to have set up things that can help you automate and be the most efficient you can be for the setup you have, so that you don't have to be a multi-million-dollar fabricator to be able to be automated.
And so that begs the obvious that the next gen detailer really is going to have to be a mastermind of fabrication and all the setup fields. Right. Not so much be this master modeler that can build a structure really quickly, but understand setup and how to set up a project and have all the variables that they say, okay, in this condition and that condition, you do these things, and then that allows software to automate the process for them.
And I think some of our guys do that today. You've got maybe a subcontract detailer that has 5 different fabricators he works for. He's got a different setup for everybody. I just think that will continue to grow and will continue to dial in, and there'll be more automation that will be asked of the software companies to make their jobs faster and easier.
Yeah, and I've always felt this, and we've seen it in our lifetimes, of the requirements of a detailer. You know,
Right.
An SDS2 detailer or just a normal detailer, just how much more is asked of them, and how much more they have to know about the project,
Right.
and general fabrication versus just being able to draw a 2D picture.
Right. I mean, especially if you think about when the job was just drawing on paper, beams, columns, bracing, and now that's evolved to, now you're working on computers, so you've got to have some computer savvy, maybe even some IT, to make sure you get everything networked the way you want. You also got to have the ability to understand how BIM is working. So now, not only do I need to know how to, as a detailer, be able to get my drawings the way I want them, I also need to have my data export to another software that I never use and make sure it's coming in the right place, and I need to know what those types of requirements are.
And I've been recently involved in AISC's early fabricator involvement series that we go to different cities and give presentations. But involving the fabricator early, a lot of times involves the detailer, and they become problem solvers to the project. And so before the project is decided on length and width and with connection, they're actually in the room discussing, hey, if we did it this way, it would save you time. If we did it this way, it would save you money. And so having that knowledge as a detailer, next generation detailers, is going to be really important.
Yeah. And so when you're building that next generation of detailers, I mean, that comes to drafting programs, apprenticeships, like gaining that knowledge. How do you build, because there's a shortage of steel detailers now.
Absolutely.
And I think we see a lot of, especially in the current environment, we see a lot of steel detailing being repatriated.
Absolutely.
So building that skill set is really important, and that's why SDS2 donates the software to schools and to educational institutions. It's why we make our training free when you're able to come to Lake Nebraska, and it's why we'll be putting our SDS2 2020 training free on our website now, when people are restricted from traveling and unable to maybe make the trip here to Lincoln to get the free training. We'll put it online and come to them now because of the way the world is.
Yeah, and there's a difference between generating details that may or may not work on the project versus generating things that make a lot of sense and save time and money. And I think that next gen detailer is going to be able to know how to manage the entire project from connections to material ordering to shipping. Whereas when it's been expatriated, sometimes all you get is a drawing, and it may or may only be member end and not looking at the whole joint. So there may be some problems with that are fixed by the detailers working directly with the fabricator. So yeah, I do think that's going to be important, and why we've offered a lot of those services online. Well, thanks again for suffering through another edition of Steel and Whiskey.
Join us next time where we'll have more whiskey, and you should too.